Well, I started using them right at the beginning, was in the 80s when they first came out, and they're a godsend. You get a kit of 4, and they're so versatile. Well, they were well received. They were well received by my generation. I'm not sure about older cinematographers, because I was one of the new kids on the block, you know, and I think they appealed to the younger generation because they were moving forward. But they soon established themselves, certainly in commercials. It's always exciting to find a lamp that is fulfilling the needs that I was looking for all those years ago. Well, Dedo lights have been the forerunners in development in terms of the quality of light that's produced and the quality of manufacturing, in that they're beautifully made.
Well, you'd have used an inky dink, wouldn't you?
I was very fond of the inky dink, yes. But this had a much better light quality, and it was smaller and was much more efficient.
More powerful.
Yes. I know I used them when they first came out. Can't remember which film it was, but I've always liked them.
Yes. I mean, they were always part of my kit, as having a small unit that I could punch something up with, but they were always part of the kit.
Well, the lighting equipment was enormously heavy. Brutes, 10Ks, 5Ks, and they were all spotlights, of course, so very, very few lights that would give you a soft, shadowless light. And you see, when I started lighting in colour, which was in 1966, the ASA was 50. And nowadays, of course, it's 500. And so that means that anyone lighting today uses 10% of the light that I was using. And then in 1968, I photographed a film called Women in Love with Ken Russell. And Kodak's brought out a new fast film, 100 ASA, and that was a big step forward because we could use half the amount of light, but they were still very big, cumbersome units, and hard work for the electricians because extra labour, and also very difficult to hide in the set. I always like to sort of put lights where they're needed, and when I started off, I worked with a wonderful camera operator called David Harcourt, and I remember I was on a very difficult set to light one day on location, and I said, well, I don't know where to put the lights, and he said, well, you put the lights where you want them and I'll hide them in the set. But then, of course, you could only do that with small lamps for the most part, and so it was a blessing when smaller lights came out which had good control and brightness and were lightweight. You could handhold them, move around with them, or you could just hide them in the set. So that was a big step forward. Since I retired, and even before I retired, I started going to various film schools, particularly the National Film and Television School at Beaconsfield, where Stuart does a lot of work. And I would talk to the students about how you start when you light a set. When you come onto any kind of set, whether it's on location or in the studio, what's going through my mind about how I'm going to light this set? And it starts, of course, with what the scene is about and where you put the camera. But the other process that I go through is what's the direction of the light and how is that direction going to affect the image? And secondly, is that going to be a hard source of light which I can control and make hard shadows with? Or is it going to be some sort of soft and diffused light? And then, of course, you have to consider the contrast ratio and how much fill light you put in. Well, for a long time we've had hard lights that can be controlled with flags and so on. But the problem with soft light was that there were very few units available which were complete within themselves, and so many of us around the 70s and 80s were reflecting light off white surfaces like polystyrene or B-board, as they call it in America.
Sheets.
And sheets, yes, or David Watkin was lighting through sheets. Well, of course, that gave a very soft, shadowless light, but it went everywhere.
Yes. Yeah.
And it was during the 70s that I first came across the egg crate. And I think it's such a simple piece of equipment and it's very self-explanatory. But the beauty of the egg light is that you can put it on a unit and transform it from a light that goes everywhere to a selected area. And you know, some lamps I'd worked with in the past, you could extend the length of the egg crate so that it became more focused, if you like. It was still a soft light, which would give you a soft shadow, but it didn't go where you didn't need it. And that was the big step forward. And when I shot on Golden Pond, I had some Mole Richardson lights, which were 4 kilowatt, and they were about, half a metre square, I suppose. And I could go from 1 kilowatt to 4 kilowatts, and I could put an egg crate on it. So I had soft light with an egg crate, and if I wanted to narrow it down, I could put a second egg crate on. But it weighed so much, it was a big unit. And so it's wonderful now to see these very small lightweight units, which are doing just what you want them to do, with much less power being used.
Well, I remember when I first worked with you,
Yeah.
and I was your clapper boy, and I remember working on commercials with you, and you had a light called a Malum.
Yes.
I'd never seen anything like it before.
Yes.
Which was really the forerunner of soft light.
Yes, it was a round lamp. I suppose it was about 1.5 feet round, and I think it took a 500 or 1,000 watt, and it had like a disc in the middle, so that you didn't see the element of the bulb, and so this disc reflected the light back into the. It was like a sort of curved back it had to it. That was a good soft light. That was one of the early ones, but it was quite small. I mean, it didn't give you an awful lot of light with slow film.
And I also remember, because when I became a cinematographer, I've been working with a lot of fashion photographers, and my into the industry was working with photographers, and they couldn't understand what we were using. And so I needed to find a unit that took something like mushroom bulbs. And I remember a light had been designed for you on Saturn V?
Saturn III.
Saturn III.
Yeah.
And it was a square light with mushroom bulbs,
Yeah.
and you built an egg crate, which is what's lighting out of this.
Yes.
And the quality of that was beautiful, but
yes,
very hot.
it was. It had 16 bulbs in, 16 500-watt mushroom bulbs, so
Yes.
that was 8 kilowatts.
Yes.
But it was about 0.5 metre square, and I designed that, and Bill Chitty, the engineer at Shepperton Studios, he built it, and it was a very good light. I used it in the studio, and it was very effective, but again heavy.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, did you work a lot then with the opposition Kino flows? Did you work with Kino flows? Were they coming in before you retired?
They were coming in. I didn't use them a lot because I didn't like the shape very much.
Right.
I didn't like the long, slim shape. I much preferred a square or a round shape. But of course, over the years that's changed. And later in my career I started to use them more. And of course, when I do workshops or master classes at Beaconsfield or various other film schools, we always have some Kino flows. They're very useful for a backing, and they're very useful when you haven't got much space, because they're slim, and that's the case with an awful lot of the new lamps, that you don't need an awful lot of space to hide them.
Well, now another thing that drives me to Dedo was that you worked with those lights. For instance, 2, 5 and 10Ks had. The 10s were huge bulbs, but they suddenly became quartz bulbs, which for me changed. They didn't do the same as when you flooded and spotted them with those big bulbs. And that's what drew me to Dedo was, especially the 650 light I showed you a minute ago. That really does have a beautiful flood and even top and bottom, left and right, and it's very sharp. And I noticed that when they were going to quartz bulbs, those lights lost it. They didn't have the quality. And Dedo seems to put the quality back. So when did you discover these, the famous light?
Well, I started using them right at the beginning, this in the 80s when they first came out. And they're a godsend. You get a kit of 4 and they're so versatile. Well, they were well received. They were well received by my generation. I'm not sure about older cinematographers because I was one of the new kids on the block, you know, and I think they appealed to the younger generation because they were moving forward. But they soon established themselves, certainly in commercials. And the commercials were a big step forward in filmmaking because instead of 2 hours or for a feature or 20 minutes for a documentary, you got to tell your story in 30 seconds. And so it was like filmmaking, it was a new shorthand, if you like, of how to tell a story in a very short space of time. And the cinematographer was integral in that and a key person in terms of the framing and the lenses that were used, but also the way things were lit. And that was part of the, you know, this sort of light was part of that movement forward.
Well, you'd have used an inky dink, wouldn't you?
But the inky, I was very fond of the inky dink,
Yes.
yes. But this had a much better light quality, and it was smaller, and was much more efficient.
More powerful.
Yes. I know I used them when they first came out. I can't remember which film it was, but I've always liked them.
Yes. I mean, they were always part of my kit, as having a small unit that I could punch something up with, but they were always part of the kit. But it's the 650, as I said, the 650 that and now later on, of course, he's gone into, there's a light called the Octidome, which you should show later. But because of the photographers that I work with, I became very influenced by these people and by their notion of light and soft light, and they had the same concerns we had, but what struck me was the power, because they used this amazing power that came out of these lights. And I think what Dedo did was he made it possible for us to move into that area as well. And I just think his notion of light is so, it's ahead of everybody. He's always ahead of everybody in what he does. I think he is anyway. And I think these, you know, we're being lit now by these little 150s. The 650s here.
So would you say the 650 is your favourite of the lights?
I love this light, it's my favourite. Notice the handle, helped to be designed by Ashley Kennedy, my gaffer.
One of the best gaffers in the business.
Yeah, come back Ashley. Anyway, it's gorgeous, and there's fronts that we can put on it, and the doors are lovely.
And that's 650, that's a lot of light for 650, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
You put it full flood?
Yes. That's full flood.
Yes.
The thing about the beams, there's no wasted light. You know, it's all within the beam, nice and evenly distributed.
That's just tungsten.
Tungsten.
Tungsten, and the daylight version is.
So what is it about the 650 that makes it such a special light?
I mean, if you here we've got full spot, doors are open, and then why I love this light is just the quality of it alone. And just look at left to right, top and bottom, beautifully even. You can put your meter left to right of this beam, it'll hardly move. In fact, it probably wouldn't move. It's just a beautiful light, beautiful shadow, gorgeous sharp shadows, beautiful quality. I never diffuse it. I would think of using something else if I had to have a soft light, though you could make this soft, but also you can put a projection, you can put the spot attachment on, and you can put gobos in it. It's just such a versatile light, does so much. it's a wonderful light for the arsenal. It's wonderful.
I would have thought it's unusual as well that you like to use it without diffuser, because the 650, I would have,
Yeah.
from my way of thinking, I would have thought it would be diffused, but you obviously like it.
No, I love it the way it is. I love using it this way. I would think of using one of his other soft attachments, you know, like the 150 or the Octidome series of lights are fabulous, beautiful soft lights, gorgeous. This, to me, I love this light. When I'm lighting with hard light, to me this is the ultimate light. I love it. I don't think there's anything else as good as this. Quality-wise, it's just the best.
It's very powerful, I imagine.
Yeah, it's nice, punchy. Yeah.